For coming out today. We're going to get this meeting started. Again, we're trying to respect everyone's time, so thank you for the conversations we had before. So we'll begin with Megan Beck in our Marketing Outreach Department.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out today, and thank you for all the responses and comments that we received before this meeting. I hope you all feel welcome, and I appreciate your time today. So just a brief overview of our purpose for the public open house. In order to increase access to public information, the meeting is being held today at Bethlehem City Hall in person and virtually. And this location has 7 bus routes that provides high frequency access and is ADA compliant. To provide additional access, this meeting will be recorded and published on our social media platforms for those who aren't able to attend. So for example, this will be on our YouTube channel for those to view in their own time. Microphones will be muted throughout the meeting to avoid any confusion or background noise online, and the public is encouraged to submit comments and questions online during the public meeting because we will be monitoring these comments and responding accordingly. Questions and comments may also be sent via the Q&A on the Teams app or via our email surveycomments@lantabus.com. And comments on these proposals will be received until March 31st at the end of the month. So on our agenda today, we will be describing what the annual service plan is, our timeline for these events, survey feedback that we have received in 2022 to support this feedback, proposed changes for June 2023, and then at the end we will have our questions and answers period and other feedback that we would like to receive. So one thing that we are trying to highlight during 2022 and want to bring into 2023 is our Your Voice initiative. The Your Voice initiative is a community engagement and collaboration program, thank you, between Lanta riders and executive leadership. So this is kind of our purpose to say that we really try to respond to and observe your feedback because that is the foundation of our service plan. The Your Voice initiative provides a structured model for productive, inclusive, and transparent dialogue for the community. And this input collected will enable us to better understand riders' needs, enhance our services, improve the marketing initiatives, and provide transparency and clarity. So this kind of goes along with the purpose of why we are having this public meeting and just to try to connect with the public more and understand the needs of our community. Now I'll hand it over to AJ for the rest of the presentation.
All right, thanks, Megan. So I'm going to go over the annual service plan process. We see it on the screen here. This was part of the Your Voice initiative that we implemented a few years back. It's laid out in a kind of a line here, but it's important to note that this is a cycle that repeats annually, and we'll look at a calendar of that in a little bit. But we just wanted to go over each of these steps. So step 1 really begins in fall. We start advertising our annual survey in August, and we perform our annual survey in September and October. The annual survey is our effort to reach as many riders as possible for feedback. We do that by providing an online survey, in-person survey. We go on buses at transit centers. We collect responses via social media, through our rider resources call center, everywhere you can think of. But that is the time period where we are attempting to reach every rider in the system. So look out for that every fall. In the annual survey, we ask various questions, including demographic questions, where you're going, where you're coming from, what time you want to go places, but also just general comments that you'd like to see across the system. So that's the first step in fall. After that, in November and December, we review the results. So we review everything we've collected through the survey process. And then also anything we've received online on social media, all those other channels I mentioned, as well as any data we've received throughout the year. The third step in the process is to create a plan. That's what we do over the winter months. Plan is really just an assessment of all possibilities that we receive comments on, and all issues we're having across the system. We assess all of them and then really determine which options are feasible. which options we're able to put in place without negatively impacting other riders. And we developed just kind of a proposal of things that we think we can accomplish based on feedback that we want to put forth to the public. So then the fourth step is presenting the plan. And that's where we've been the last month. That's where we are right now. So we put those options out to the public and solicit feedback again. So this is your other opportunity each year to reach out to us and comment on what we're proposing to do. So we put out those about a month ago, and then we have a public meeting where we are today, where we receive feedback on any of those proposals and make any last minute adjustments wherever they're needed. The last step is implementation. That comes after this meeting. So like we've mentioned a few times, these are proposed changes. We might make some modifications based off your feedback. And then in a couple weeks, we'll put out the final plan for implementation in June. So if we want to go to the next slide, it's pretty much the same process, but just laid out by month across the year. You can see in the middle here, we're at public meetings and scenario comments. So that wraps up at the end of May. We'll make any last minute changes, and right now we're scheduled for a June service change implementation on June 19th. So we'll mention a few more times, but please submit comments in the next week for any feedback you have to include in this plan. We want to include any additional feedback that you want to give. So we'll go on to the next page. All right, why are these routes changing? This is the question everyone's asking. We're all frustrated with the constant changes. Everyone, riders, drivers, planning. We are trying to mitigate as many changes as possible, but we all know we've seen a lot of changes over the last 3 or 4 years. So I just want to address what the main drivers of those changes are. The first and probably the most apparent to everyone is commute pattern changes from the COVID-19 pandemic. We all know what happened in 2020, and during that pandemic, we saw a lot of people change the location of their jobs, change the location of their homes, and coming out of the pandemic, we've seen a lot of changes in commute patterns as a result of this. So those have been changing in the last few years, and we're finally starting to see some new commute patterns. So we're trying to adjust to those. The next is fleet and driver shortages. This is not for a lack of drivers or a lack of buses. It's because the region keeps growing. So we are trying very hard to add buses. We're trying very hard to add drivers, and we have been hiring quite a few and adding buses to the system. So you might have seen those driver and training buses all over. Be nice to them, welcome them on board. The more buses we get, the more areas we can serve. So that's what's happening there. And then the last is EBS implementation. EBS is a term that you've probably heard us say a few times in the last few years, but you're going to hear us say it a lot more. EBS stands for Enhanced Bus Service. It is our plan for bus rapid transit across the region. And it is part of a long-term effort that started really back in 2012 with the Moving Atlanta Forward initiative, but really got kicked into high gear in 2014 when they established that rapid transit across this region is needed. So EBS is our version of rapid transit. We began implementation in 2019, and even through the pandemic, we still see that these EBS corridors and stops are our primary destinations. So that implementation has happened over the last few years at the same time as all of this. So like I mentioned before, we're trying to limit the number of changes as much as possible. I think moving forward, we're going to see less of them because a lot of these things are starting to stabilize themselves. EBS will be fully implemented this year. We're finally seeing those commute patterns, and we're getting more drivers and buses. But it's important to note that there will still be changes because the region still is growing. So we just want you to be aware as we move forward. We'll be seeing less and less changes, but this annual service plan will keep happening. We still want to receive your feedback all the time. I'll mention with the survey, in the survey section, we receive a lot of feedback, and I imagine we will still be receiving that into the future. So please keep those comments coming as part of the Your Voice initiative. I think the next section is survey feedback, so I'm going to toss that back to Megan when she can get up here. So that Your Voice initiative I mentioned has been mentioned. That feedback comes in all forms. So we have our 2 times each year, annual survey in fall, annual meeting right now, but any way you want to share those comments throughout the year, we go back all year and review every single comment from the last year. So Megan, you want to take away surveys?
Thank you, AJ. So yes, I'm typically the person who goes over the surveys and tries to promote them throughout the community. Atlanta began collecting surveys from riders on October 25th, 2022 to November 25th, 2022. So this is part of our annual survey period that happens every fall. The different methods that we used for the 2022 survey were the SurveyMonkey link, which is accessible via mobile, desktop, and tablet. And then riders without access to a computer or digital device were invited to complete the survey over the phone with a rider resource representative, or they could fill out physical surveys that were provided at the Bethlehem and Allentown transportation centers. And the surveys were collected both in English and Spanish. For a total that we received for 2021, we received 571 responses, which was the largest number that we've had thus far. There's been a significant increase in our social media following and interactions with followers and riders on social media. More riders were using the transit app and token transit for mobile ticketing and tracking the bus. And all online resources have been used to communicate information and updates. And these responses help us to focus on particular areas for different initiatives moving forward. And I'm going to pass it back over to AJ for some more info.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, so as Megan mentioned, we completed the survey last fall in 2022 and received lots of service-related feedback. So I just wanted to mention, as part of that planning process, we received comments from all across the region. For example, some of the things we consider are access to retail destinations. We get a lot of comments on service to Glenside up in MacArthur, serving that new Wawa and McDonald's area. We get comments about service to Nazareth, service all the way up to Slate Belt. We looked at opportunities based on feedback of connecting the 217 to the 214, better connections to Forks. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but I can tell you there's lists of dozens, if not hundreds, of options we consider based off feedback. So from there, we add some additional considerations, municipal plans, regional plans, and the EBS project. Municipal plans are developed at the city or borough level. For example, Allentown Vision 2030 is a plan, Bethlehem has a plan. We make sure that any changes we implement are meeting the vision of local municipalities. In addition, regional plans like the LVPC Future LV regional plan, again, we just want to make sure anything we do is in line with those regional visions. So if you have a particular change that you'd like to see, reach out to us first and foremost. Please let us know when and where you're trying to go and what times, but also reach out to your local planning offices at your borough, your township, your city, and your region, and let them know that you'd like to see this as part of the vision, because we work in connection with those. And then, of course, the EBS project that we mentioned, this is something that we are building across the region. We just want to make sure that we are providing adequate underlying service wherever we add the EBS limited stop model on top, and that's part of why it's been a multi-year implementation. But also, we now have faster service across the region because of EBS, so we want to make sure we're connecting properly into those EBS stations. So those are additional considerations we have based on survey, and at that point, we present our proposed service changes. So we can go on to the next slide. It's just a quick look at the proposed June system map. We'll post this online in the presentation. You can get a closer look at it. But essentially, it's a current system map with the proposed changes we're discussing today on it. Again, this is not final. We are looking for feedback from everybody, and we're going to discuss. There are a couple options where, we're presenting two different options. So we really want to hear what your preference is on those options. And then we will put the final system map out to the public along with our final plan service changes in a couple weeks after we receive comments from this meeting. So before we get into the actual specific changes, I want to kind of zoom in on this key on the bottom right corner to just kind of talk about the service types we have across the region. So if we want to go to the next slide. This is a complicated and long topic, but it's very important to understand. Atlanta operates 8 different service types. And it's important to understand that these service types have different purposes and needs, specifically because we are a government entity that is responsible for providing transportation service to all constituents, everyone that lives in the Lehigh Valley in some form or another. And everyone has different needs across the Lehigh Valley. So if we were to provide the same type of service to everyone everywhere, no one would really have the service that they actually need. So I want to go over these service types as quickly as possible to just kind of help us understand how they're layered on top of the map and how we can connect using all of them. So I'm going to go a little out of order, but we'll start with the trunk routes, which are labeled as 100 level bus routes on the buses. They're dark blue on maps. And these operate on the region's busiest and densest corridors. So they're, the trunk roads that connect all of the towns and boroughs and cities across the region. These routes are designed to connect 7 days a week, long service hours. They may not be the most frequent. Generally, they're hourly, but they're the reliable service that connects the region all day. Then we have our urban routes, which are labeled as 200 level bus routes, and they're purple lines on the system map. Urban routes are designed to operate in the densest parts of the city, so they're considered urban. So they're dense boroughs and cities, and they're really in places where we have a lot of people that are looking for additional frequencies during weekdays and Saturdays and daytime hours. So that's what the urban routes are designed to capture. Next are our 300 level commuter routes. They're yellow lines on the map. These are designed to connect people to their jobs, to employment centers. So they're generally operated during office hours, but I mentioned we've seen a lot of changes in commute patterns these last few years. So generally they're weekday only services, but you might see some off hours. One good example of that is Route 319. We have a 3:30 in the morning trip that goes up to FedEx on Willowbrook. That is the perfect example of how 300 level service can be designed to meet specific shift times or specific employer destinations that aren't necessarily on trunk routes or urban routes. So if you have a job that is not necessarily reachable on any of our 100 or 200 level services, first and foremost, reach out to us. Let us know where you're coming from, where you're going to, and what time you want to be there, what time your shift ends, what time you want to leave. We can look to see if we can fit that into our regular service schedule. But in addition to that, please also reach out to your HR representatives or your managers at your businesses and have your HR managers reach out to Lanta to suggest specific trips that might meet your needs. We have additional resources that we can work with employers on to provide specific trip times whenever that's needed. So that's a very important step in addition to letting us know. Next, we'll move on to flex routes. Oh, no, go back to the key, no worries. Flex routes are 500 level service. You'll see them on the system map as giant pink zones. Flex routes are a little different. They are curb to curb service anywhere in the zone. So you can make a reservation up to 2 hours in advance and get a ride from any address within a zone to any other address within the zone for the same price as any other Lanta bus. So if you have a monthly pass, that's good on the flex routes. If you want to pay the $2 cash trip, that's good on the flex routes. They're open to the general public for anyone who wants to ride. And flex routes are really put in place for one of two reasons. Oh. Lost my notes. Sorry, they're put in place for one of two reasons. One, where infrastructure is unable to accommodate a 40-foot bus. So we have, pretty big buses, and they don't always fit on every road or around every turn. So that's one consideration. Two, in areas where the density of riders or the times that riders ride aren't able to group into a fixed route service. So there are some areas where our buses fit, but riders are coming from addresses that aren't quite in a line or at different times of the day where we can't really fit out a fixed route bus. So two examples of that are Route 502 is the Slate Belt area. That service has plenty of riders. Plenty of riders ride it daily, but they aren't all traveling at the same time or from the same place or to the same place. So it functions very well as a flex route and would function less well as a fixed route. Simply because if we had a fixed route, then all those riders at different times would be forced to do their trips at the same time. and people just have different needs in that in the Slate Belt area. A different example is our Route 503 flex in the zoo area. So we get a lot of comments on access to the zoo pretty consistently. And even the zoo would like bus riders to be able to access the zoo. But unfortunately, the zoo is located in a nature preserve and has, well, fortunately for the zoo, but unfortunately for bus riders, our buses can't fit there. So if you've ever been to the zoo, you know you have to drive through a river to get out of it. You also have to go over a few covered bridges to get there. We just can't take our 40-foot buses there. So we have the 503 Flex that operates Walnut, Port Slatington, and the zoo area in Schnecksville. But we'll talk a little bit later. We can look to expand that to offer service to areas for people better. Moving on, capacity enhancers are 400 level service. We generally think about of those as school buses, but they aren't school buses. So capacity enhancers operate anywhere where there's a lot of extra ridership on specific days. That doesn't necessarily happen every day. So it's most frequently associated with schools because schools don't operate in summer, they don't operate every day. And so when schools are out of session, we don't operate the 400s. But 400s can also be operated for festivals or any other shuttle service. It's just important to remember that even though they don't show up on maps, they are open to the general public. We don't show them on maps because they don't operate every day, and we don't want you standing out there if a bus isn't going to come by. But if you do have 400 level service operating and you do see it, you are welcome to ride it, same fare as a regular bus. Next, we have Lanta van service, which is curb-to-curb county-wide service. I mentioned we offer service to every address in the county through Lanta van. This is by far our most expensive service to operate, so the fares are significantly higher, but it is a service open to the general public. As I mentioned, the fares are higher, so we have very few general public riders on it. The overwhelming majority of users of this service that benefit from the service are ADA, disabled riders, anyone with Medicare, medical trips. There are various programs that offer discounted trips for riders with disabilities and medical recipients. But it is a good option if you feel you can't walk to a local bus stop or you struggle with that. Reach out to our Rider Resources Department to see if you qualify for any of those programs. Because Lanta van service, there are a lot of ways to qualify, and it might be a good option for you, especially if you're in a rural area that doesn't have flex or fixed route service, or you're struggling to walk to your local fixed route bus. And then last but not least, we'll go back up to the top of the list to talk again about EBS. This is our newest service type. We began implementation in 2019, but really we're finalizing that phase 1 implementation this year, when we'll start referring to Route 100 as the green line, and we'll start referring to Route 101 as the blue line. So blue line and green line are our new rapid transit lines that connect the region. And when that happens, we'll be going limited stop across the entire region, but also increasing frequency. So it'll provide faster, frequent service across the region. But it's important to note that this is intended to be rapid transit service, and each of the stops are intended to be neighborhood stops, not necessarily block stops. So on the system map, and we look at it, we now have named stops that show up on these EBS lines. It's important to figure out where that stop location is for your neighborhood. And maybe just check to see if the walk to the stop is worth it to get more frequent and rapid bus service. We also wanted to mention that these stops are designed at the neighborhood level with input from municipalities and local community groups. So if you'd like to see any changes at your local stop, reach out. We're finalizing the service, but we still have plenty of room to go for capital improvements at these stops to make them better. So that's a lot of information, but we'll go back to the system map, and I just want to go into a few target areas to talk about where the service changes we're proposing today are situated in the region. So we'll start with this larger box on the left. This is the West Allentown, Briningsville, Foglesville, Trexlertown area. The reason we are looking at service changes in this area is because of capacity concerns on Route 213. There are a lot of jobs in the Briningsville area. And we have various service types going out there, but there's a lot of crowding on the 213 that would actually get to their jobs faster and more frequently with other route connections by going through the Hamilton Boulevard, transferring at Trexlertown area. So what we're proposing today is kind of twofold. One is to consolidate the 213 and 218 into one new route called Route 218. It is the Fogelsville route, and it's designed to operate to destinations pretty much north of 78. So any of the Fogelsville warehouses on Snowdrift, but also the Citronia area, Integrated Health Campus, Lincoln Tech. But it's important to note that we did include the loop on the western end from the 213 for anyone trying to go to, Nestle or All-In at Penn. This route does no longer go to Boulder, though. So any riders in the Amazon area should look to other routes. Now, mention those other routes. There are a bunch. We have the 101 Blue Line, which has been in place, and it connects with the 613. We've noted that there were some connection issues at the Trexlertown Transit Center. With this service change, we're increasing the frequency on the Blue Line to every 30 minutes. And with the limited stop, we're improving the on-time performance of the Blue Line. So we've improved that connection to really have a seamless connection at the Trexlertown Transit Center, which is located by the Movie Tavern. But you can also stay on that bus and transfer at Mill Creek, where the Walmart is, or go a little further to Trexlertown Plaza if you want to do a little shopping on your 20 whatever minute transfer, because you have that bus every 30 minutes. So you can get a little shopping done at the Giant if you want to do that on your commute. So those are options. We also have the 322 is making a comeback. And this is a good example of the implementation process for EBS. We previously had the 322 that went out this way. We combined it with the 101 in Easton to create the new extended 101 service about 3 years ago now. And now that we've been able to improve that 101 service up to a point, we can add the 322 back in. So right now, it's pretty much operating the same alignment we saw before. From the city of Allentown down Hamilton Boulevard, all the local stops all the way out to Trexlertown Plaza, but then every trip extends along Citronia up to FedEx on Grimm and the Amazon on Boulder. So this is really set to be the local and commuter route. It's a 300 level route like we discussed before. So when we get to that section, you'll see that we have a few select trips there, but we want to hear from you on your commute times so that we can make sure that we adjust the 322 to meet your needs, and then hopefully we can grow that again in the future. Let's move on to the other area we're looking at today, the Whitehall area. This was being looked at in response to a couple things. We received comments from residents in the River Central area, which is Northampton, Catasauqua, on wanting faster service to the city. Riders in that area don't all want to do all the loops in the Whitehall area to go to all the shopping centers. At the same time, we received comments from riders in the city that they want service at all hours to those shopping centers. So that was the main driver for looking at it. Additionally, we had to stop using the S-curve at Redner's in Whitehall because that's private property and there were some safety related issues. Even though we've used it for decades, we had to stop using that S-curve this last year, and it led to some longer trip times on the 103 that was leading to some on-time performance issues. So that's why we're looking at the area. We really have two options we're proposing today. The one that we proposed a month ago is to extend the 603 north to serve all the shopping centers, and then extend the 103 to streamline it past the shopping centers. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of confusion that was caused by what we posted a month ago. A lot of people thought we were removing service from Northampton, and I just want to be clear, we are not proposing to remove service from Northampton Borough. When we said we were no longer going to Redner's, we were talking about Redner's Whitehall, not Redner's Cherryville. So this route 103 will still go to Redner's, will still go to Northampton, still go to Catasauqua in the same alignment. The two options we're just kind of considering are whether or not we should extend that 603 up or whether we should split the 103 alignment into two options. This alternate scenario came from a lot of feedback we've received over the last month, so thank you again for the comments. Keep them coming. We love the comments. But the concerns that were addressed were the 603 doesn't operate at nights or on Sundays, and a lot of shoppers wanted to go to MacArthur Town Center and Whitehall Square at nights and on Sundays. So that's where this alternate proposal came from, where we can operate 2 branches of the 103 during that whole service span and have evening and Sunday and weekend service operating to the shopping centers while also providing that faster ride for Northampton residents. And then the last map we see here is just kind of a focus on the Easton area. We aren't proposing any changes to the Easton area routes. I just included this to show the EBS improvements that are actually affecting the entire corridor across the region. So as this is an example of where you now see the name stops. Again, none of the other routes are changing, but you can see that there are name stops along the way that are a little further to walk to, but will now have 30-minute service, all-day service on the Blue Line Rapid Transit. So we just wanted to bring attention of how you find those stop bands on the map. And I think that's it for general. We'll get into specifics on individual routes if we want to move forward. All right, we included a bunch on this presentation. We'll put the presentation if you want to look further, and anyone with questions after, we can go back to these slides. But generally, we just want to go over each of the proposed changes. So Blue Line and Green Line, we know as the 100 and 101 right now. We're proposing to increase frequency on the Blue Line, but Green Line, we already have half-hour service. The only proposed change here is to adjust that 5-minute shift that happened in January back so that the Blue Line and Green Line work together to have service every 15 minutes across the corridor. So if you want to go to the next slide, yeah. Blue Line will be increasing 30 minutes during certain hours. So with these 2 lines working together, between Allentown and Bethlehem, you'll have bus service, Allentown and South Bethlehem, you have bus service every 15 minutes all day. I believe I made a note here. So it's 15-minute service from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. all day, every day. And that means if you're standing at ATC in Allentown, you want to go to Bethlehem, you'll have a Blue Line bus on the hour, or I'm sorry, a Blue Line bus at 15 after the hour and 45 after the hour. You'll have a Green Line bus on the hour and on the half hour. So if you're standing there every 15 minutes on the hour, 15 after, 30 after, 45 after, there's a bus going to Bethlehem. The same is true the opposite direction from Southside Bethlehem or from Bethlehem Transportation Center. Every 15 minutes all day, you have a bus going to the other city along the corridor. And then in addition, you'll still have the Route 102 beneath it if you need any of the local stops there. Go back one more quick second. So we're proposing to expand the Blue Line times quite a bit. So it's 4 in the morning until 2:20 in the morning for hourly service. But then it's every half-hour service from 6:30 in the morning until I didn't write it down here, 10 p.m. until 10 p.m. And then it'll be hourly for those early morning and late evening trips. All right, now we can go to the next one. So I mentioned earlier the consolidation of 213 and 218 and why we were looking at doing that. The proposed route 218 is essentially the 218 that is currently existing from the city out to Snowdrift and Windsor Drive, and then we're adding the 213 loop onto the end of the 218. So it's a combination of the 2 routes to serve all the same destinations, and it's generally aligning with the current 218 schedule. So that's the proposal there. We can go to the next page real quick. So like I mentioned, it's generally the 218 schedule, and I believe we added the Saturday and Sunday trips that align with employment times. So right now the 213 and 218 have kind of odd times on weekends. Those times were added to this proposed route to meet any specific employer shift times. Okay, next one. We mentioned the 322, it's back. This was one example of how we had to get to the EBS. So we had the 322 a few years ago. We combined the 322 with the 101 about 2 years ago, 2 years ago. And now that we have built up that service enough, we can add the 322 back in. Right now we are proposing specific peak capacity times. If we continue to see more local ridership, we can continue to add service to this, but we can go to the next slide. Right now, it's really focused on select trips where we have a ton of ridership. We just want to make sure we have capacity offering direct service to 650 Boulder, where the Amazon facility is. We've also spoken to both FedEx and Amazon, and we're open to other employers. If you have specific shift times you want met, please reach out. And this is where I want to stress, send comments now in survey comments online. If you have a specific time you're trying to get to any of your destinations out in Briningsville, please let us know where you're coming from, where you're going to, and what time you need to get there, and then also what time you need to leave. We can reach back with options based on a proposed service, but we can also look at adding specific trips wherever they're needed. So we really need that feedback, and I'd like to stress that this schedule is not final. I think the times you're seeing are times that we've found we need, but we can still add trips in if there's any missed trips. So please, please, please reach out if there's specific times and let us know where you're trying to go and when. We can go to the next one. I mentioned the Whitehall area, the 103, 603 situation. So this was our proposed expansion of the 603. This is kind of option one we're considering for better access to the shopping centers. The issue you can see here is there's no evening service and Sunday service on this proposal. And if we go to the next slide, the other option is adjusting the 103. So we kind of have two versions of the 103, and they alternate all day. So they both have the same span, but from the Lehigh Valley Mall south all the way to Spillman, it's the same service. North of the mall, one trip would bypass all the shopping centers and go straight to Northampton. The other trip would go to all the shopping centers. So that's the other service proposal we're considering. And we'd love to hear feedback on if there's any preferences. So again, this was brought up based on a lot of comments we've received over the last month. And we really appreciate all the comments. We'll accept even more. Right now, our comments are leaning toward this proposal. That's why we proposed it. We received a lot of requests for this. So please let us know if you see any other issues and we can work to address them there. If we go to the next slide. Oh, yeah, so that's kind of a proposed schedule. We can look deeper into that if there are questions. And then the next slide. This is another example of receiving feedback over the last month. One of the big long lists of items we received over the new year is service on East Broad Street. So I think a lot of us know we had to move the Blue Line to Southside Bethlehem as part of the EBS plan, and received a lot of feedback on East Broad Street on needing service. The problem we have had is riders requesting service on East Broad all have different needs on where they're trying to go. So some riders are trying to go to Stefco, some are trying to go to Southside, Westgate. We received a lot of various feedback, but we started to receive a lot of good feedback in the last month. So we really appreciate everyone who's commented. And we found that we could make this adjustment on the 102 to provide service to the Union Boulevard corridor, Allentown, and South Bethlehem without impacting service times anywhere else on the 102 route. So if you're anywhere outside of what you see on this map here, there's no change to the 102. This is purely just an alignment adjustment from Southside to East Broad Street in order to provide additional access on East Broad. So again, we'd love to hear feedback on that. If anybody in South Bethlehem is looking for service, all of the stops that would no longer be served by the 102 are all served by both Blue Line and Green Line service. And again, that Green Line operates every 30 minutes. And even in the limited stop conversation, all of the same stops are served in Southside. So we'd love to hear feedback on that as well. And then the next slide, the last proposed change we want to talk about today based on feedback is an expansion of the 503 service. So I mentioned service to the zoo earlier. We took a look at all those comments. We received comments wanting better access to the zoo. We received comments wanting better access to Luther Crest, better access to Cedar View Towers, better access to the medical facilities around the 309 Tillman interchange, as well as better access to Crest Plaza, Village West, and Cedar Point, where the Weiss is on Hamilton Boulevard. We looked at all those. None of those really worked in isolation, but expanding this 503 does provide service to all these areas, and it actually does it in a really cool way. So I mentioned we had some physical issues with getting buses to the zoo, but now you can ride any of the Blue Line service or the 102 service or any other, the 107 service to Village West, and connect to the 503 directly to the zoo. And again, flex services are the same price as any other fixed route bus. You just need to make a reservation for them. But if you have a monthly pass, you can ride the flex service as well. If you have a day pass, if you want to pay cash on board the bus, those all work on flex services. So this is a solution to provide access to those areas that were requesting it that we just couldn't fit a physical bus. So we're hoping to make that expansion. Please provide comments on that if you have any. Yeah, I think that completes the proposals. So yeah, there's one last look at the system map, and we have it here if anybody wants to walk up and ask any questions. But I think we'll move on to the question and answer portion. So thank you for your patience. That was a lot of information. But again, if you have specific questions, feel free to ask them. We want to break it down for your individual needs. So Daryl and Megan, how do we want to handle the question and answer session? We have a lot of previously received questions that I think we'd like to address. Megan, have we received questions online? If you are still asking questions, feel free to submit them. And I'm going to defer to Daryl and Megan.
So the point now is the presentation is over. So whatever questions you have, you can ask me, Curtis, Mary, Megan, AJ, or Joe, and they'll answer your questions. We'll still be addressing questions that we receive at the mic, but we're not going to take any more of your time without answering anything. So at this point, this is where everybody just kind of asked whatever questions they had, the reason they came here, and you and I will figure out who answers the questions online.
Okay.
I do have an online question. Sure. Someone online asked, are you changing the 103 to South Bethlehem to hourly only? It is currently every 30 minutes during the morning.
Yes, so that early morning peak 30-minute service on the entire 103 will become hourly. And we've also looked at other connection opportunities to Fountain Hill. We've been looking at 327 and 108 alignments. One thing we want to stress is, again, the service from Southside Bethlehem to Allentown is increasing to every 15-minute service. So if you maybe previously went over Susquehanna, there are a lot of trips that are faster by going into Southside and connecting to the EBS routes. But yes, currently the plan is every hour. Questions?
So, if you guys have questions, get up and ask. So
Yes. So these are like.
Okay, so we do have a lot of questions received over the last month. We can address them here for everyone to hear, because a lot of the questions are kind of grouped together asking similar things. So regarding the Blue Line or 101 service, how will the limited stop locations be determined? I think I mentioned that to a few people here as well as in the presentation. They're mostly determined by neighborhood groups. So we've spent a lot of time over the last decade actually communicating with municipalities and local business groups to determine the best locations for these stops. That's why we saw some minor modifications over the last few years, like the stop in front of Supremo on 7th Street moved up the street a little bit. That was at the request of the local business community. We also have made a couple other adjustments here and there. So that's how they're determined. They're determined by local representatives and riders in those neighborhoods. So we receive feedback from riders. Please submit your feedback to us, but also talk to any neighbors, business owners. If anybody has a consensus on where those should be, we're open to making any modifications there, but that's how they're determined. How will the limited stop locations be designated? So right now we are, they are just signs on poles like any other stop. We've changed the names on apps and on Google and on the system map. So if you see a named stop, that is an EBS stop. We are also working on quick physical improvements. So we'll probably be changing signage at those stops very soon to help designate them as different from other stops. And then you'll also see various capital improvements over the coming years. We've installed new shelters at 20 of the stops over the last 2 years. We're still doing improvements there. We're working on real-time signage at a lot of the stops. We've also added some static schedules, so you might see black boxes at some of these EBS stops listing your departure times. But again, most of the capital improvements will be determined by the local community. So some of these types of systems, they take a giant shelter and plop them down in every neighborhood. But it was recognized a long time ago that the Lehigh Valley is very diverse in their needs. And so each of the individual stops is designed to meet each of the individual communities' needs. So not every stop is planned for a shelter or real-time signage, but if you'd like to see that, please talk to your local elected officials and local community leaders, including business owners and community groups, on what you'd like to see for these destinations, and we can work toward those improvements. Communicating which stops will be for the blue line. Yeah, so we received quite a few questions about where your stops will be. Again, you can look in the data to kind of see the name stops, but we also have a list of stops here today. So if you have any specific locations you'd like to ask, we can look them up for you. We can also post that list online. It's kind of a long and confusing list, but we can post it. But if you have specific questions, reach out. I know I've received questions about Franklin Park. Franklin Park is located at 13th Street on Turner and Chew. So eastbound is on Turner Street, westbound is on Chew Street. Fairgrounds and not Old Fairgrounds, those are two different stops. Fairgrounds is on 17th and Chew, opposite sides of the street by the hospital. Old Fairgrounds is actually on 6th and Allen, a totally different part. There is a neighborhood there called Old Fairgrounds Historic District. That's how that got its name, which is different from the new fairgrounds where the actual fairgrounds are. I also received a question about Stones Crossing. So Stones Crossing at William Penn and Stones Crossing in Palmer Township, Easton area. That stop is actually going on Nicholas, right by the Redners. So Nicholas Street by the United Church of Christ and Redners on Nicholas at Stones Crossing. I don't know if there were any other specific locations, but feel free to ask them. All right, next area. Route 103, will it still go to Northampton? Yes, we apologize for confusion on that. When we said no more service to Redners, we meant Redners Whitehall Square, right in the heart of MacArthur, not Redners Cherryville. It will still go up to Redners Cherryville. How many trips will go to Northampton? So again, it's the full service span, early morning trips all the way to evening trips, 7-day-a-week service will still go to Northampton. It is limited to either every hour or every 2 hours based on the branch concept design here today. So it depends on that 603 versus 103 branch, but we are not proposing to remove any evening service, early morning service, or Sunday service from the Northampton or Catasauqua areas. How many trips will stop at Lehigh Valley Mall? All of the 103 trips will stop at Lehigh Valley Mall. Specific times and locations, I think they're in the presentation, so we can look back if anybody has specific questions on that. We have we received a bunch of comments on the Whitehall Square vendors, so I think we addressed a lot of those. If you have additional questions, we can answer those. 213, 218, will there be time changes to this route? Yes, but I think the important thing to note is that it's more modeled after the 218 route than the 213 route. So the current 218 schedule is pretty much what the new 218 schedule will be, with the 213 loop added onto the end. So if you're missing connections at certain times, look to all those other options. The blue line to 613, the 322, and another option I didn't mention is Route 508, a flex service, operates 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Monday through Saturday in that area. You can connect at any of those connection points on Hamilton. Truxtun Transit Center at the Movie Tavern, the Walmart at Mill Creek, or the Giant at Truxtun Plaza. And anytime 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Monday through Saturday, you can go to any warehouse in that area, all the way up to Allentown Comprehensive Treatment Center. So it goes all the way up 100, includes all of Snowdrift, all of Windsor, all the way out to New Smithville, which is that last exit up the hill on 78 before you leave Lehigh County. Includes the treatment center, the Weiss-Vogelsville, covers that whole area. So make sure you look up Route 508 in addition to 322, 613, and the blue line for your options to get to destinations in the Briningsville area. We are also planning to be at ATC on this service change whatever happens based on your feedback, regardless of which combination of routes happen to Breiningsville, we'll plan to be there the morning of the change to help anybody with any last minute questions on what the best route for getting to their destination is. 603, will 603 go to Northampton? So again, I think this was confusion based on the way we communicated it. The 603 is not planned to go to Northampton. The 603 was planned to go to the Redners on at Whitehall Square, so in MacArthur. The 603 was only planned to go as far north as Whitehall Central in the MacArthur Town Center area, not all the way up to Northampton. The proposal is always to keep Route 103 in Northampton. I think that's it for the general comments I've received over the last month. Yeah, we have another specific comment?
I got one.
Yeah.
So my sister relies on
Correct, but you mentioned Whitehall. If she's going to any of the specific shopping centers in Whitehall,
no, she just
Okay.
gets a regular bus stop on the bus.
yeah. So the 103, there are no changes to that alignment north of Whitehall Central, and I know we do have comments written for returning to the surveys, right? Are we sending those out sometime soon?
Respond to all the ones that we got email. Some bounce back.
Okay.
That happened.
So yeah, I apologize.
I'm just speaking on behalf of my sister.
Yep.
She relies on.
No, I appreciate it. I apologize. We did respond to the emails this last week. But
When she seen that it was going to get eliminated, and that's why I showed up here.
yep. No, I appreciate it.
But I just appreciate that you said it's not going to get eliminated.
Yep. And the same span. So early morning, there's a 5:30 trip in the morning. We're planning that all the way to the late evening trip and 7-day-a-week service. So we're still planning service to Northampton, Catasauqua during that entire span. There may be some frequency adjustments to it, though.
And this presentation that you had, wants to watch it, you can watch it online.
Yeah, we're gonna record it. This is being recorded now, and then we're gonna put it up on our website.
At the website there, that survey thing, or
That's the email.
she just goes to Atlanta.
Just go to lancebus.com.
Yeah, so for anybody online, the question was where you'll be able to see this presentation. As soon as we're done recording, we'll post it online. It might not happen today, it might happen tomorrow, but we'll post it on the proposed June 2023 service plan page, which is linked at the very top of every Lanta page. So right across the top, you'll see 2023 proposed. You can click that, see this presentation, provide additional comments there. And again, if you're commenting on this video, if you're commenting here in person, we're documenting all comments on social media or survey comments, we'll receive all of them. So if you have any comments, please get them to us however is most convenient for you. But again, the most helpful comments we have are what time you're looking for service, which days you're looking for service, and where you're trying to go. So one additional question I would ask your sister is what specific times she likes to travel, just in case we adjust any of those frequencies. Yeah, so we'll look into that. I don't have that here. I'm sure 2 other people in the room here with me do have it. So we'll chat after about this. Yep. Are there any other questions?
That will be posted online, you know, like final service.
Yes. So that's an important thing to address for anyone still listening. These are proposed changes. We're receiving feedback through the weekend. We're going to make final determinations within the next couple weeks. And by mid-April at the latest, so probably 2 or 3 weeks from now, we will post final planned changes, and that's the difference between proposed and planned. When we finally have the planned changes, we'll post the system map, all of the route maps, all of the planned schedules, and I think we might be able to push it to our GTFS feed so you can search your future times on Google or on any of the apps. So yeah, look out for announcements mid-April, but 2 months before the service change, we'll be posting all of the exact schedules based on your feedback. So again, please, please, please respond. If you're not seeing a proposed time in any of these schedules, let us know what time you're looking for. We'll see if we can include it in the final version.
Thanks.
Yep.
Question.
Yep.
The changes that are in effect today, 218, are the schedules out yet?
So we have proposed schedules that we include in the presentation. If you want to come up after, we can look at specific times. We'll post those proposed times as part of the presentation you'll see online.
Those schedules out yet?
No, and that gets back to what I was just saying. They're proposed, they're not finalized. Once we do have the final schedules, we will post them probably mid-April in a couple weeks from now. We'll post the actual schedules online for you to review 2 months before the service change happens.
Okay.
Yep.
Not much to wait till others switch on because it's not specifically for work to get to workplace, something else for that. But maybe keep us specific.
No, that's fine. What's on your mind?
But first, I want to say, first of all, a comment that wonderful what you guys are doing because big area, and I've seen how taking the bus years back when it was limited routes and how it's expanded so much, and it's great that the more frequent stops that fewer, but because I actually walk 20 minutes to half an hour just to get to a stop. I'm out in that area toward the Chestertown, findings, up at Hamilton Crossings and New. Thank goodness for the shopping centers and places that bring more bus routes. And it's to be enlightened to the Lehigh Valley Zoo and give a new Smithville. And I had a question. Is that a specific bus, somebody going to a medical center that they're New Smithville or something, or a specific group that's going to Lehigh Valley Zoo, or can anybody making the connection, but you pay?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the New Smithville service, the zoo service, those are our flex routes. So they are operated by Lanta Van, but they are open to the general public for the same price as a regular bus. So if you have a bus pass, you can use it. If you want to pay just a cash fare, it's the $2 cash fare. So yeah, same price, open to the general public. You just need to call and make a reservation, but anybody can call and make a reservation.
But now seniors that have that, it's free?
Yep. And so seniors who have the Seniors Ride Free card, it's free for them. They just need to call and make the reservation. As long as you show your senior card, it's free to ride just like any other bus. And again, it's any destination within that zone. So, we talk a lot about connecting at, Hamilton Crossing, the target area, to go up to New Smithville or whatever. But if you want to go from New Smithville to Snowdrift for whatever reason, you can go to any address within that zone. And that is true for all of the flex zones. So if you look at our system map, all of the pink areas, there's little 3-digit numbers, 501, 502, 503. If you're within that same zone, you can ride any address in that zone to any other address for the same price as the Lanta bus.
Okay, because I have two boys with special needs, and they can get like a little bus, like to medical things, but other things probably have to pay. But like if I went with them, or we want to go up to the zoo or to out toward New Smithville, the only thing is no Sunday. I no Sunday service. I can't go to church out there because that's one of my big things. Sundays with churches, and that's just the one thing about Lanta limit. No, I get to a lot in town and stuff, but it's just great. And again, I have to get going, but I can get the bus toward New Smithville, then I can walk from there to Kempton, where I grew up now. But maybe 50 years down the bus route to Kempton area, Kutztown, whatever.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you so much for coming today. And I just want to address those comments on Sunday service. That's part of what we've seen in the last decade. Just adding Sunday service was a huge deal for the region. We continue to see it grow. Sunday service hasn't made it to flex service yet, unfortunately. But yes, when you call and make those reservations, talk to the rider resource specialist, because anyone with special needs probably has access to an ADA or Medicare discount for the Lanta van service. And then you could book as a general rider using the flex service on the same trip, but you're using the two different fare services. So make sure you talk to your rider resource representative whenever you call and make those reservations. The flex services, that's why they're flex. They have lots of flexibility. So yeah. Any other questions? right, Megan, do we have any other questions online? Okay, well, I really appreciate everyone for coming out. Again, this is part of an annual service plan. Before we implement what we presented here today, we want additional feedback. So please, please, please let us know if there's specific times you're not seeing, specific times you want to go places. We can add those trips in last minute. And again, if you have new locations or new times that we aren't being proposed today, to your employers, talk to your HR representatives, but also throughout the year, provide all the comments. Even if you're not submitting in the annual survey or right now, any comments we receive through any means through the entire year get reviewed as part of this process. And that's because of the Your Voice initiative. So thank you again, everyone. And we will stay here at Bethlehem City Hall until noon if anybody wasn't able to make it or has any other questions outside of the recorded session. So thank you.